Well, and we have KT McFarland on the line, Fox News national security analyst, host of FoxNews.com's DEFCON 3 show, which can be seen 1 p.m. Wednesdays on live.foxnews.com. KT, Brad Thor says he's a big fan of yours.
A huge fan.
Well, it's so great to be on with the three amigos.
That's right.
I'm
Actually,
Dusty.
I'm Chevy Chase in this one.
That's yeah.
Because I live in Chevy Chase.
Well, I'm
so
not Martin Short. I know that. All right, listen. Let's move on here. We want to talk about what's going on with. I want to talk about Edward Snowden. He's still in Russia.
Yeah.
Venezuela has apparently offered him, asylum and said you can come here. And the Russians are saying, you might want to take that one, Edward. That thing from Venezuela. You might want to pay attention. You might want to take him up on that offer. Sort of not kicking him out, but sort of encouraging him to do that. What do you read into all this?
Out of him.
Say again?
China got what it wanted out of him probably within 5 minutes of his landing because they got what was in his thumb drives and on the laptops. So they got rid of him like a hot potato. Then he went to Russia. They got what they wanted out of him. They probably debriefed him as well. And they're done with him. He's expendable. He's like an old dish towel. Now, the problem is threefold. One, he gave him a lot of information, not just facts and information about what we knew, but he gave him a lot of information about how we knew it. In other words, how do we gather intelligence? And the third thing was he gave the Russians and the Chinese an opportunity to absolutely humiliate the president and the United States.
KT McFarland, let's shift to Egypt for a minute. So much has happened in just the week since we last spoke with you. And as of yesterday now, it looks as though the military has named a prime minister. They've got $8 billion in promises of aid from wealthy Arab allies there in the Gulf. And it looks as though the United States is going to continue backing the military, even though they basically just engineered a coup. Is that a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely a good idea, because although Morsi was democratically elected, he, like Hitler, who was democratically elected, immediately set about dismantling the democracy. When Hitler was elected, what did he do? He went after the parliament, the courts, the military, persecuted religious minorities. That's exactly what Morsi was doing, except Morsi wasn't as good at it. Now they've gotten rid of Morsi, and they're going to try to reinstate a democratic process, they get a redo. The important thing of all of this, though, is it's the economy, stupid, just like in the United States. In Egypt, the economy is in free fall. The number of people below the poverty line has gone up 100%. Half of the population doesn't have any food except what bread the government gives it in subsidies. And the money to buy that foreign wheat and bread, that's basically over. I mean, the Egyptian reserves are almost gone. There's no tourism. There's no foreign investment. Wealthy Egyptians are leaving the country. So the important thing of whether this new experiment works or not is, does somebody give them aid? Now, we're giving them mostly military assistance. But yesterday, when the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates announced almost $8 billion in aid, that's huge, because that potentially buys them the time and the political space they need to get a new government up and running that can ultimately fix the economy.
Do you have any thoughts about this debate that's going on in Washington about whether or not the funding should be pulled? Because a lot of people say, well, it really was sort of a military coup, and if it's a military coup, the law says that you can't give them the money. Where do you weigh in on that?
Well, coup schmoo. I mean, if that's what the law says, it's a coup. But then go find out how you fix it. Go to Congress and make the case and say, look, without our aid, this new government's going to fall too. And then Egypt is going to go through a cycle of revolution and counter-revolution, ultimately of chaos. Don't think Turkey, think Pakistan. We do not want the most powerful, populous Arab country in the Middle East to descend into chaos. And so if we can help, now it's no guarantee that it's not going to be a bad conclusion, but at least it gives them a lifeline. We ought to be doing everything we can to help this new government and use our money, use our aid, not as a gift, but as a tool. That buys us a seat at the table. That allows us what we should have done all along with Mubarak, and what we should have done with Morsi is to say, with Mubarak, form a more inclusive government, have political and economic reform. What we should have said to Morsi is, we're giving you guys a lot of money. For that, you want to have an inclusive government. You don't want to go in the Hitler direction. We never use our aid as a tool, and we should.
But, KT, and it's Brad speaking now, all of these Islamic states, how much of an inclusive government can we expect when these things are based on Sharia? the Constitution. Even in Iraq, we see that's based on Sharia, and we've got Christians in these areas. How equally represented can we, expect them to be?
Well, I'm not expecting them to turn out to be Switzerland, but at least some kind of functioning government where the majority of the people feel that they have a stake. What are the alternatives? Is what you have now, where it's a Muslim Brotherhood government that's slowly and systematically eliminating every other group, crushing them, and harassing and persecuting Christians, for example. What did you have before that? You had a Mubarak government that wasn't spreading around the goodies. I mean, the amazing thing about the Mubarak government is they had an economic growth rate of probably 8% a year, and yet that wasn't reaching the people. So inclusive government, I'm not talking about Switzerland. I'm just talking about a government which seems to represent the majority of the people. In other words, not a government where one guy's elected and then all the political opponents, get lined up and shot.
Yeah, there was this report that came out yesterday that sort of talked about how Osama bin Laden was able to hide in plain sight in Pakistan. And among the more interesting revelations was that Osama bin Laden wore a cowboy hat to hide from spy satellites, and once was stopped by police and given a speeding ticket, which he apparently resolved right there on the scene. Any thoughts about that report and the larger information in it?
Well, I think in most things in life, it either boils down to it's either their conspiracy theory or the incompetence theory. I'm sure that the Pakistani authorities are plenty incompetent. But I got to tell you that when the United States gave Pakistan $2 billion a year in 2001 and 2 to say, you're in the finding bin Laden business, you guys go find him, here's $2 billion a year. What was their incentive all of a sudden? It wasn't to find bin Laden. They knew the minute they found him, they'd lose out on the $2 billion a year. They knew if bin Laden died, they'd lose out on the $2 billion a year. They knew if we found him, they'd lose out on the $2 billion a year. So what did they do? They shuttled him around Pakistan. One branch of government probably knew where he was. Maybe the rest of them didn't. But by and large, they knew that he was their insurance policy for $2 billion a year, and that's now gone.
I would like to briefly point out that if Abbottabad, Pakistan, had speed cameras, we would have had a picture of Osama bin Laden speeding.
Okay, well, there you go. Another reason.
Could have. Why didn't the NSA get it?
Exactly.
All right, got to leave it there. KT McFarland, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.